God and Other Delicacies has a weekly newsletter. If you'd like to subscribe, email me at godsdelicateshow@gmail.com and I'll put you on the list. Hello, everyone. Welcome to God and Other Delicacies. I'm Nicholas D'Augusto. I was raised a Roman Catholic, and although I was a devout young child, my thoughts on God have grown and changed a lot over the years. And because of that, I love talking to people about what their experience with God has been in their lives, from when they were young children to how they're living with the idea of God today. So that's what we're going to be doing on this show. So let's get to it. Today, on what is our inaugural show, I have the privilege of welcoming Rob Kerkovich. Now, Rob is a self-proclaimed schmactor and schmwriter. I can vouch for the actor and writer parts. He's smart, he's funny, he's constantly creating, he's a big action and sci-fi movie buff, and you can currently find him starring in NCIS New Orleans as Sebastian Lund, which means I don't get to see him enough. Mm-hmm. He's a husband, a father, a dear friend, and it's an honor to have him on my show. Welcome, Kerkals.
Hey, buddy, thank you.
Oh, it's so good to have you here.
I'm excited. You've brought a stack of books.
Yes.
Ranging from, what do we have, A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking?
Sure.
To The Tao Te Ching by Stephen Hawking.
There's a lot of stuff here, yeah.
It's very inspirational to me. I'm excited to be a part of this journey. I brought a champagne bottle to smash against this microphone.
Oh,
for
great.
Your inaugural, the setting sail of your
I'm sure
your
our producer will
persona.
appreciate that.
Yeah. I also brought another microphone, so we should be fine.
Oh, good. That's very nice. Gosh, so prepared and so generous.
That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, man. No, I'm really excited about it. Obviously, I mean, you and I have talked about this. I actually called. Kirk was one of the first people I called. He was actually the first person I called to run by some of the ideas I had, and I started shouting it out to you to see, like how you felt about it, and it was only natural that you were the first one to come in.
I'm happy to be a guinea pig.
So it's going to open with basically the same two questions every time. I have a feeling I know what the answer to the first one is, which is, what did you have for breakfast this morning?
I had a bowl of yogurt.
Oh, no, I was wrong. You actually did get a nice breakfast in.
I wouldn't call it a nice breakfast. It was, 3 scoops of yogurt in a bowl with a hastily poured granola on top of it, eaten mostly while standing. So, it was fine. I could probably get something after this.
Okay, good.
That's where I'm at.
All right, buddy. Well, now into the meat of it. The most important opener is this. How and when were you introduced to the idea of God in your life?
Well, I was also raised Roman Catholic by my parents.
In what part of the country?
In the Northeast, in Massachusetts. And so I don't have a specific memory of just when it was sort of introduced, other than we were going to church. I can't remember early on if it was just on the holidays or every Sunday. But, Christmas would come around, we'd have the manger set up. All the major hits of Catholicism we would go through. There was some question. Oh, yeah, there was some question, though, of whether or not it was every week or not. So there was sense. So we'd go through, so I don't know if this jumps ahead or whatever. But
no, there's no jumping ahead.
We would go through phases of how devout of a Catholic family we were, right? So sometimes it had to do with family tragedy would suddenly kick it off, and suddenly I'm being woken up at 7 a.m. every Sunday, we're going to church. It's what are you talking about?
Because we're sad.
Yeah. So we have to.
We must atone.
We have to prevent further tragedies by showing up. And then there'd be phases where it was just the holidays. I don't know how. I guess we'll just talk about it. So eventually, I fell out of it.
Right. I mean, do you want to? You could go wherever you want.
I mean, it seems like we're talking. We're talking about it in my childhood, and and I think I definitely had phases of I definitely was asking my parents a lot about God and what do we is he cool and
so
stuff
you
like
felt
that.
comfortable asking them, and then
were they
pretty good at
they were pretty good
time?
at they were good improvisers. They would come up with stuff to say well he's up there. We were just talking about heaven. I remember a lot of stuff.
Can you pick an age range?
0 to 10, 12, something like that.
Right, so the questions are coming out around 10 or 12.
Yeah, I would say
8 to 12.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely ran through a phase where before bed every night I would say Our Father, the Hail Mary, I think the Act of Contrition.
Oh wow, that's heavy. You're doing that every night?
Yeah. Well, I didn't know what it meant. I mean, I didn't know what any of them meant. They're just like random words that you're uttering. You're basically uttering spells, you know?
Yeah.
So,
right, but that's only the spell that you do when you go in and kneel before the priest.
Well, no one told me that.
Booth.
Like, there were like three prayers that
I can
were like.
still say the act of contrition, I think.
I mean, the
oh
funny
my
thing
God,
about the
I'm heartily sorry for having.
Well, that's the thing about
the
the act of contrition, right? Is that like I feel like everyone's got it's like a
yeah,
cover
there's
band.
A lot of versions.
Everybody
yeah,
has different. I feel like Hail Mary and Our Father are pretty locked in. I think Hail Mary might have like one or two separate different words.
No, you're right about
Act of contrition is like beat poetry. People just change it up constantly. Like, oh God, I'm so sorry for what I've done, and if I've ever wronged you
really super
or your
fucking
family,
sorry.
Get the hair whip. So anyway, So I would say all those every night before bed, and then I would also ask God to bless, and then I would run through like a litany of names that I had that I would say in the exact same order every time.
How sweet.
So, my parents, my aunts, all the, because I really only have like one blood aunt. Everyone else, every other aunt and uncle in my life was just like a friend of the family that was just always around. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Because I was an only child, and it was just from
Were
a
your
small
parents
family.
only children?
My dad was.
Okay,
My mom
so
only
this is
had
one of the reasons.
Yeah. So I would just bust through like everybody, and then finish off with the pets, rounding it out with the pets, and do a nice.
God, you were so caring.
Yeah. And then even around then, I think I would also, before that, I would pick up the Bible and I would go to a random chunk and just read it.
Right on.
Again, most of it made no sense to me.
Sure.
Because a lot of that, it's a big book. And a lot of the time you're flipping through and you're just getting to the paragraph that's talking about who begat who.
Oh, yeah.
And you like close it and you're like, I guess I really learned something.
And everybody lived to 160 back then.
And I think in the back of my mind, it was always like, are these heaven points? Did I get some more heaven points? Because I think, unfortunately, look, I'm not going to begrudge anybody for being religious. I am no longer that. I feel like I'm a spiritual person, but I don't subscribe to any particular religion. And having dealt with Catholicism, I feel like in my experience, it just seemed like there was a lot of trying to work hard for the end result, right? Of like, I just want to make sure I checked off all these things so that God will let me into heaven. And at a certain point, I don't remember when, I think in high school then, just to kind of round out the story, I guess, my evolution.
Hey, man, we got time.
By high school, so I went to an all-boys private Catholic high school.
Yeah, right. I think I forgot that, although you and I must have talked about this before because I did the same thing.
So it wasn't like I was really a hit with the ladies up until 8th grade, but then there was no opportunities from that point forward. But
that's why I started doing the plays.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not the only reason, but
because they bust in. They didn't bust them in. That sounds horrible. But they, girls could come from every other school.
All girls' schools.
Yeah.
Anyway, I didn't.
Anyway, so
I
went from striking out with girls in my public school to striking out with girls from other schools. But yeah, I think around then, because at 15 you get confirmed.
8th grade is confirmation, so I
Really?
thought it was a little earlier. I thought it was like
later
more
for
like
me.
13 or 14.
It was later for me because I still had to go to like CCD.
Oh, I see. So maybe
in
you had
high
a
school.
slightly different. Well, you know what? That's interesting because I went to a Catholic grade school as well. So we were doing all of that in house all day. I never had to go to CCD because I always went to mass on Wednesdays.
Oh,
and then I was going to mass twice a week, basically my whole life.
That's 4 hours of your. That's 4 hours of your life.
And I went to a Jesuit college. Yeah, right, man. I went to mass for a long, long time. But basically, the point is that what we've discovered here is that you had a slightly later confirmation date. And mine is because I was like I was in a Catholic.
I almost wonder if there should be like a
structure.
separate mass for kids. Because at least with Catholicism, it's like those things are an hour long.
Yeah.
And I guess it depends on the priest or whoever.
It was almost always an hour.
It's like the first time I ever went to a non-Catholic wedding, I had my mind blown.
Oh yeah, right.
I was like, we're done?
Yeah, right.
I was like, that's just the opening remarks.
Yeah.
But I think like with little kids, it's like you're sitting. These churches are huge, and there's all this like imagery of Christ being, crucified.
Sure.
And you're just sitting there like as a kid, like looking around. The songs are terrible.
Yeah.
Like they're not going to pep you up. It's not like you're getting gospel blown in
Occasionally,
your face.
you would walk into like a church where the person that ran the choir was like legit.
Sure.
And they could sing. But yes, most of the time you didn't have
You're
that.
sitting
it's
there.
Volunteers.
You're looking at the weekly pamphlet of the news, in the diocese news or whatever.
Right,
you're like,
right.
what's going on here? And you read that 3 times. You look at the ceiling and you imagine what it would be like if it was upside down and you were able to like have a fight on the cool like.
That's very specifically you, but I love that.
You didn't do that. So anyway, that's a whole.
Were you able to save the congregation, or did the congregation often die? Like how many of the congregation would?
No,
die
it was usually a
fight?
solo fight.
Okay.
I don't remember if it was
People
versus
just watched.
Satan specifically or just anybody. It was probably terrorists because it was the 80s. So
Right
it was like,
on.
oh, so it's got to be terrorists.
Cool.
But anyway, so around like high school, I remember sort of starting to wonder, like maybe it's a little too intense for me, like the whole Catholic thing. So then the sort of the next logical bump down was like, well, then I'll go to Protestant. Maybe I'll just check out what's going on in the Protestant world. They seem chill. They seem pretty cool. Think they can have female
It's kind of hit. They're rebels,
pastors or whatever, right?
right? What is it? 99 Theses?
Yeah, Martin
It's
Luther. That's
99,
kind of
right?
cool. Was
99?
it? I feel like that's the Jay-Z song. You might be confusing them.
It's
But it
not
also
100
doesn't.
Theses,
It doesn't
was
sound like it would be like 92 either.
I thought it was 100.
I think you might be right.
Something like, gosh. Damn
Yeah,
it.
whatever. He tacked him onto the door and
The
all that.
point is that he was, this was the rebel against,
Right.
throwing
It was-
off the Roman Catholic Church. So you're actually quite literally throwing off the
I
Catholic
didn't- I
Church
guess
and
that's
replacing
true.
yourself with Protestantism, is what you're
I didn't
following
really
Martin
think of it
Luther's
as that
footsteps.
cool. That's a cool way to look at it, like wanting to be like a
Well, in
rebel.
retrospect,
It was
yeah.
more like, it just feels like this is a lot more like, they're just more chill. They're just more relaxed about everything.
Sure.
The
The pastors can marry.
Yeah, that was cool.
That's a big deal. And women can be pastors.
That was all I was I was starting to feel that
Those
a
are
little
big,
bit.
Those are big changes.
Yeah, like freshman year, so I was like 14. I was starting to think about that a little bit. I don't remember if I really brought it up to my parents. I think if I did, I don't think they didn't, they were like, how dare you? They were sort of like, whatever. And then by 15, which is when the confirmation thing was going down, it became clear. I was like, guys, I'm not feeling this. Like I said something like that to my parents. And my dad basically said, look, just get confirmed and then do whatever you want.
That's quite a lot of freedom, actually, a lot of respect, frankly.
I'm pretty sure my mother, on the other hand, stuck both fingers in her ears and went, la, 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 la. So, because that never registered. So I basically did that. Like, I got confirmed. I went through the whole thing. And I think I took my dad's name as my confirmation name because there was a St. Thomas. I don't remember anything about it. And then
I just remember that I was waiting to get done, so I
yeah.
could get
So then
out.
I'm sort of in this nebulous in between world. I don't really know where I'm at. And then ironically, at the Catholic boys' school, I have to take a world religions class.
Okay.
And the teacher,
you got to take theology.
Yeah, the teacher, to his credit, basically said, "Look, I'm a practicing Catholic. I'm going to walk you through these other religions as if I also believe those. As if, like, for every section, I will be a follower of Islam. I will be a Buddhist. I will be, So
That's very cool.
yeah. So I was like, well, all right, great. And then that sort of like opened up my entire like world, because then once I started hearing that like all these other religions have like really valid things to say about how to live your life and how to treat others and all this stuff, it suddenly like it was like I honestly had a sort of a weird like enlightenment moment in my desk in high school. Like I still think about it.
Wow, that's cool.
And I think we were talking about Buddhism, and I can't remember, of course, what, but there was something about, either the suffering thing or whatever it was, sort of, I was like, oh my God. And then that pretty much sealed the deal that I was no longer a Catholic in my mind. And now I don't know what I am. But
Did you at the time then think that you were was the answer to try to go to a different religion? Like, were you like, well, I wasn't born into any of these cultural practices, but I'll try to read more Buddhist literature, or maybe that's a philosophy.
Sort of.
Did you go through that process?
A little bit. I mean,
like, did you continue, reading religious?
I think at that point I felt like after and I'm only kind of realizing this now that we're talking about it, but I think once I saw that there was all these different options, I realized that you didn't even need to marry yourself to any one of them. I was also a big fan of Bruce Lee, who was talking about G.O.D and how that's a amalgam of several different martial arts. And so I was like, no, if I just do that with a religion.
Yeah.
So
right on.
You know what I mean? It's just like you find the things that sort of make sense to you, and then and be a good person. I mean, that was the important thing to me. And I never felt the need to like label myself anything else after that.
And so did you, as you met your wife, you dated for a long time, I know, before you met her, or before you married.
Yeah.
And you have a son now. Mm-hmm. Do you two could talk about, how, like, is important for you, or is it something that doesn't, kind of pester the either of you? It doesn't live in your brain in any sort of pestering way. You're very content in trusting each other's sort of just general morals and ethics?
Yeah.
Because I know you're both beautiful people,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
is there a structural thing that like nags at you guys, or no? Is it easy that it's gone?
I think the only thing that makes this sort of thing about it is our kid, and making sure it's like, well, how do we set him on a path where he will hopefully also be a good person and better, maybe a better person than we are. So that's the only thing. We never once thought like, well, let's put him in a church, but trying to figure out how, as sort of, I guess, atheist. I don't know what we are. Atheists, kind of atheist light, adjacent.
Yeah.
How
I was reading a book that was actually by this writer here.
Let's refer to the stack of books.
It's where is her book? It's Rebecca Newberger Goldstein. I really like, and she wrote this book. The book I have here is Plato at the Googleplex, but she has another book, and she refers to this atheist writer as an atheist with a soul.
Oh, okay.
And again, it's just people trying to figure out how to walk this line. We don't really have the language at the moment. It doesn't seem to say, okay, well, atheist is this word that we grew up with. I don't know for you, but when I was growing up, which seems a bit more of a devout upbringing, in that my father was very, very strongly Catholic and very much wanted us to follow the rules. My mother was very supportive of that. Atheism was like kind of synonymous with the devil. Like it was like it was almost like Satan worship.
Yeah.
There was no explanation of what atheism
you
was.
had
So
a
to
one-way
say
ticket
atheism
to
even
hell.
today still has this connotation of,
That's why
especially for people
I
like where we
hitched
came
up
from.
just then, I think.
I
That's
know,
why I was
yeah.
like, is that okay to call myself? Like,
Right.
Like kind of waiting for a pitchfork to come in from
man.
the ground
Yeah.
and stake me.
No, I know. I could kind of sense that. I felt it. I mean, it's taken me a while too to sort of play around with.
But isn't that funny how it has those like long-lasting psychological effects, and it's just like a word.
Well, they you know about Christianity from before you can form memory when you were raised in the religion like
Right.
that. You know what I mean? It's attached to our deepest primal instincts. It's
Yeah.
very difficult to separate because I knew about God before I even could remember that I knew about God at that
Right.
time. That's
Yeah.
it's interesting. And so you but what you're saying is that you worry a little bit, or is worry, I'm not sure if worry is the right word, but you're concerned to some extent, or it's a question that you think about.
Yeah, for sure, because
With your
the
son.
benefit of being raised Catholic is that, for better or worse, there's a lot. I don't think a lot of, well, I'm sure a lot of Catholics would disagree with this, because people disagree with anything just having to do with religion at any point.
Sure, this is a very delicate
Catholicism,
subject.
to me, my experience with it, not necessarily from like the way that my parents acted or anything like that, but just sort of in the teachings and stuff, it's like it's a very medieval feeling vibe there. And you do a lot of stuff out of like guilt. You do a lot, you're told that you were born with the sin before you could even do anything that was sinful. And so you've got this sort of like thing hanging over you all the time of like, I just got to be a good person because I got to shake off this guilt, or I got to get, in God's good graces. I don't know how I got out of his good graces, but apparently I was born out of his good graces. That's so awful. I feel so bad about that. So that's sort of like I think that's a prevalent kind of a lot of underpinning to Catholicism. So you find yourself doing good things, not necessarily because you want to, but because you feel like you have to. For whatever reason, the obligation is there.
Yeah,
that's not how it should be.
fear.
You should want to be just a good person, and I'm sure,
Right.
and that's, I'm not speaking for all Catholics or anything like that. It's just that was sort of my experience with it, or at least the way that I interpreted it. So
yeah, I certainly can.
So that's like the one benefit.
empathize.
If we decided to just suddenly bring our son to a church, it's like, well, here, learn that you need to be a good person, and it's a lot of pressure to be like, all right, well, we're not going to do that because we don't necessarily subscribe to the church and all that stuff. So how do we kind of get that across without making it feel like this is something he has to do, otherwise X, Y, and Z will happen to him? And I think we're going to figure it out. Like I'm not. I guess I worry, but I'm not concerned.
Yeah,
it's something that I want to make sure we do. There's something called like the Virtues book or something like that. There's something that we sort of,
I feel like I've heard about
when
this.
we first got to when we first put him in daycare at this school, we went to like a couple week seminar thing where it was basically saying like, hey parents, you don't feel like raising your kids religious, how do you want to go forward? And there's this, I think we got it. This is how great we are as parents. Like, I think we got that thing that would change my son's life.
It's somewhere.
But you kind of like settle in on like words.
It's under the cat litter.
You settle in on words like kindness or understanding or forgiveness and all these things. And you sort of like pick a word and be like, how did you exhibit that this week? You know, and we haven't really gotten in these conversations with him because he's just about to turn 5. So I think it's coming up on time to like get into that,
right?
Just to sort of lay those foundations. But he's also turning out to just be a good kid. So I don't know what we did.
Yeah,
but
it's an interesting thing. I mean, you know, it speaks a lot, I think, to us, or to people that have been raised in religion. And I can only, you know, you and I obviously start from a place of a deep familiarity.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, not only Roman Catholic, but raised in specific schooling together. So naturally, you and I were going to find like a sort of simpatico friendship. But,
right.
you know, it seems to me to be something familiar to a lot of people from different religions that, like, you know, you just have this sense that if you're not somehow surrounding yourself with the structural, some structural force that bends toward God in some way, that you're like undercutting goodness in yourself or in your children, and it actually gets at a very deep question, which is how were morals and ethics conceived.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've come to believe that that's a very, it's an evolutionary trait, you know, philosophy and religion and these types of things are expressions of moral and ethical, impulses, and sort of like, you know, but you know, it's fascinating because I certainly deal with these same questions, you know, talking to my wife about it, who was not raised in a religious upbringing. Anyway, this is a good place to take a pause.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get back to it. At the break, we learned something absolutely fascinating. And as a dear friend of Rob's, shocking, frankly.
Oh.
I had no idea that this, not that I doubted you could do something like this or would do something like this, but I had no idea you were playing around with the idea. So what are you going to do before your 40th?
My goal is to get my first tattoo before I turn 40.
Gosh, I can't wait to know all the details.
There's not much.
So many details. I'm going to make up other details.
I will say this, and then I'll be saying this. I'm like, I've decided to maybe get a tattoo before I turn 45. You know,
is it to maybe? Is there still a maybe? No, you've decided.
I've decided.
Okay.
It's just about that final, like, get into the place and deal with the pain.
Do you know what part of your body you want it to be
my
on?
left forearm.
Wow, so you want it out in public?
You know, when you say it like that, it makes me wonder.
Well, I mean, you know, there are different ways of looking at tattoos, right? Are they like a private thing?
I thought about it.
Is it like I'm going to wear it
I
proud,
thought about it.
You know?
I feel like for me, getting a tattoo on what? Where else am I going to do it? Like on my bicep? I'm a skinny guy. Like I don't want. It's got to look weird. Like I don't want to put
You're
it
kind of bone everywhere. Like it's going to hurt no matter where you go.
On my chest, it's like if I put it on my chest, where am I? Like over my heart on a pec.
Right. If it's on your back, you never see it.
Back. Yeah. It's. I'm not putting it on like a leg. That's weird. Like. Right. It just felt like there weren't a lot of options.
What about right above your butt crack?
Oh yeah, like and have it be kind of large and maybe just a butterfly.
Yeah. Or like I don't know, like Japanese. You know,
just writing.
Yeah, like literature.
Totally. It just means a lot to me.
All right. Okay.
So I was toying with ideas, and then it finally came to me. I'm a big fan of this movie called Predator.
Oh yeah,
it came out, I believe, in 1987.
Oh, as if you don't know.
I think it was. I get a little confused. Well, I watched with our good friend Ian Gottler. We watched Red Heat last night.
Oh, you did?
Schwarzenegger and Belushi.
How
Had not
wonderful.
seen that in a while. Did not hold up the way I was hoping it would. Very interesting. Walter Hill directed it though. That was kind of anyway. I digress. So I want to get in the movie Predator. There's the titular predator. It's a creature who hunts for sport from another planet. Mm-hmm. He comes across a
Is it really just for sport? I forgot that because I had only watched it maybe once or twice.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I know.
But,
I mean, for you, this is sacrilege.
So at the end,
this is why this is religiously valuable.
I'm worried about spoiling the ending, because it's a 32-year-old movie and maybe people haven't seen it yet. But
surprisingly, you get far enough and no one has seen it. Right. So there's a. But no, Predator, I say it's okay.
Well,
do what you must.
It should be fairly obvious that when a predator, regardless of how strong or tall he is, goes up against Arnold Schwarzenegger, he's going to lose.
Yeah, that's
right. So when faced with defeat, the Predator reaches over to his. He has all kinds of high-tech gadgets, and he reaches over to his special little wrist computer, and he types a bunch of shit into it. Oh wait, can I? I can't swear.
No, you can. You can swear all the time.
Oh, great.
Swear as much as you want.
I didn't realize where we were at.
I think I've dropped a couple of F-bombs already.
Oh, okay. So anyway, he types a little mysterious tippy-typey into his little wrist pad, and he sets off a self-destruct system. Because he's like, I'm going out. I'm taking you with me.
Right,
he starts,
right.
laughing at him.
And is this before he's taken
using
the mask?
Sonny's voice. What?
Has he taken them?
Yeah, the mask is off. Yeah, he's already been called an ugly motherfucker.
Yeah.
Which also might have prompted his self-destruction.
Yeah, sure.
He never thought about it before.
Until
Arnold,
as he was dying, he was like,
this ripped mud-caked behemoth tells him he's ugly. He's like, I never thought about that.
I'm going to get you, asshole.
Yeah, so he types in this thing, and this digital code kind of like appears on his wrist. And that is what I want to get the tattoo of on my forearm
really
in a similar
cool.
spot. So it's like, it's sort of like the red digital marks, but they're all like scrambled and they're like Predator language or something like that. But it's just like 4 panels that have the lip. And so
they're like they're almost like it's
like a scrambled digital
hanging
clock.
Chad codes or something. Aren't they? They're little like blocks and squares.
Yeah, they're like if you looked at an old school red digital clock and you took the numbers and you like sneezed on them and they went. And they flew all over the place, then you've got sort of like the 4 different...
That's rad. Will it be in red then?
Yeah, red with maybe like black outline around each panel.
That's very cool. That's very cool.
I think so. This is what I needed. This is the last sort of like hump. I just had to talk about it on air.
Good. Well, now you're locked in, man.
Because if I don't do it, the millions of fans that I have
are
all going to be hitting me up.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, the 400 people on Twitter.
Yeah. Well, that is some really juicy, wonderful stuff.
But anyway, religion.
Oh well, yeah. I mean, I'll find the transition back. But I actually thought. So when I was young, and when I first started, the dude I first started smoking pot with. This was all very secretive. Back when I was like 16. I was very compartmental. I compartmentalized friendships a lot because I think I was at that time I was insecure about liking so many different things and people, cliquey things are cliquey in high school. And I was like in different cliques and stuff. But then also my parents, were very antennas up about me doing drugs or any of their kids doing drugs. And thankfully I was the third child. So like my 2 older brothers had sort of beaten them down a little bit. But
there is no
I was able to get away with some things. But what I realized was like if I got good grades, they almost never questioned me. And then I met this dude and we became friends and he was a big Marilyn Manson fan. Another devil worshiping. This is a type of guy. I went to his concert and there were religious people out there protesting the thing.
Because he had like I feel like he did like upside down crosses and stuff. Like,
and this was his Antichrist Superstar tour, which was very directly, turning the reverence for Jesus. Yeah, he was, which is, and I at the time had no idea how to like really respect it. I just knew that it was like cool to go do this.
Did he have some sort of religious background, I'm wondering?
To be honest with you, I don't know. I have
Maybe
to imagine.
Maybe he could be your second guest.
Oh God, I would love that.
Could be sweet.
Can you imagine?
He's an awesome interview.
How ridiculous it would be if that guy wanted to come on my show, having never had my show in the public sphere at all before.
Yeah. That sounds great. I'll be there.
Anyway, I would imagine there is. Just because he was so deft at playing with like the iconography of all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And that was such an important part of his image.
Yeah.
At the time, I was like, this is really cool to try, just to even enter into a sphere and realize, okay, so we're not dead. Like there hasn't been any lightning. There's no fire.
Yeah.
I saw him like shatter a bottle on stage and then stab himself, and he cut his shirt off, and then you realize he's wearing like a protective garter belt. That's a pretty wicked image to watch a guy stab himself in front of you. Anyway, I only say that because it was a really impressionable concert, and that guy later, my friend, was like, we should get tattoos of the Antichrist Superstar necklace. Right. Like it was a necklace that we had, and then it was like an image, and it was kind of like it was almost like the AC/DC symbol. It was kind of like I think it was the actual AC,
like the
not
font?
the actual like the electricity symbol. Like
the lightning bolt.
The lightning bolt. And I did not get the tattoo.
Okay.
And our friendship did dissipate over time. He was a very sweet man, but I went on to college and he stayed there. But I never got the tattoo. But it was the closest I probably ever came to getting a tattoo. And I just don't see myself doing it. Although a friend of mine recently had a really beautiful, and you know what? This is going to be, I see the transition. And then later when I'm more experienced, I'm not going to say I see the transition.
No, I think you should let everybody know that it's coming. Like a guy on an airport runway with the
radio host that's like, oh, I see what I'm about to do.
Watch
this,
guys.
Pretty good. I imagine you'll like it. So my dear teacher, my dear artistic director in college died about 6 years ago. Mm-hmm. She had breast cancer. And her husband remains one of my dearest friends. And I actually met my wife kind of through a chain of events through this man. We went to go visit. I was visiting, and through Phyllis, my teacher who's passed away. We was visiting her a lot during her last months. And one night, she would obviously go to bed very early. Uh-huh. We all went out and got drunk. And I met one of my buddy's other friends, who was kind of more of a younger guy, like more my age. He was my age, and then whatever. Through him, I met my wife, and this is a very important friend of mine from that time. He has a beautiful kind of reverence. He actually, frankly, my first artistic mentor, and during his wife's final year, he got some poetry tattooed on himself. It was his first tattoo at the age of 55.
Hey, all right, so I got time.
Oh yeah, you got time.
All right, great.
And the idea being that these are things you're going to live with your whole life, and he lives with his wife now in this very specific way. He holds this moment, and so the transition is. Do you think about does not being in a religious structure anymore make you think differently about death or heaven, hell? How will you describe this stuff to your son? Have you had these questions yet? My son is younger than yours. So.
He hasn't really gotten into what happens after, because we also haven't really been talking about anything beyond what's in front of our face. So I don't know if he's necessarily thinking in those terms.
Right.
But no, there was definitely a slow transition. There was it's ironic. There was a slow come to Jesus on science and nature and stuff like that, because because it started with me being well, I know I'm not Catholic anymore. I know that there's all these other religions. They're also great. I mean, there's great stuff in all of them. I was like, but man, what does this mean about my whole heaven thing? Because I don't want.
What was your whole heaven thing?
That there was something. I was I told myself look, there's got to be. I mean, this is all crazy. The fact that all this has been made and fits together, there's got to be somebody behind it. That was sort of the next sort of transition into things. So I think that there is something out there beyond, and that when we pass through, we'll pass on to another plane of something, and so I kind of held on to that for a while, and I think one time I was talking to my wife, and she was like. No, I don't think. I think we die and then that's it. I mean, that seems to be the most logical thing. I was like, oh crap, because I think I'd been circling that for a long time and just wanted it to be no, it's gonna be the thing where you finally go up and you get to see dinosaurs and all these other things.
You get to ride dinosaurs.
Yeah, it's you get to meet all your people that you wanted to meet. So you get to show everyone your Predator tattoo. So
how long ago was this when you do you remember this is before Elliot was born?
This is probably 7 years ago, something like that.
And so something about this conversation is really memorable because it feels like it's a watershed moment where you're okay.
Because I think that was the sort of the last domino to fall, right? It was well, if I don't believe all these other things, then why would I believe that suddenly we're all having a party afterwards? And it's honestly, the more I would watch David Attenborough, BBC America, all the Planet Earth stuff, it's it's this cycle of life and death, and that's what it is. To me, I'm not saying anything else, but
you're on the show to talk about yourself. You're not preaching.
So it's sad to me in a certain way, but I think I'm starting to find more beauty in it, because honestly, one thing it does is it makes you realize oh well shit, this is it. I better get cracking.
I think that's a beautiful discovery.
And then also just sort of this is how it was all made. Now, I don't know, it is still impressive to me that all this exists around us and beyond into space and all that stuff. Everything that exists in what you would call nature is mind-blowing. And so I know that there's the whole intelligent design concept and all that stuff. I don't know anymore. I think that's what I had sort of fallen into. That's basically what I just described. But and then at a certain point, I was like, I don't know even if that's a thing. I think for me, God is just like when I think of the word now, I don't think about a guy in a beard and a robe and like in the Far Side. I feel like I think of it as just like the reminder of everything that's around us and how beautifully it all sort of like fits together, like the good things and the bad things.
Right.
And then that is God. That sort of just the natural wonder of it all.
Yeah.
Not
That's
somebody
beautiful.
who's making decisions or somebody who's watching whether or not you're going to score a touchdown,
Right.
stuff like that.
Right. And there's also a deep, and yet at the same time, there's this deep mystery, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the core. I mean, the question will always go back and back and back and back. And like, this is a domain of philosophers, right? So then if there's a God, what comes before God? Who made God?
Right,
And so, we can, the word God is an interesting one to sort of give only, it's like, it's an interesting word to give over only to the domain of a specific type of God, right? Like the word God feels bigger to me. I'd like to almost win that word back.
Mm-hmm. It's got no, there.
Yeah, there's no way, but
Yeah.
I mean, but like this is why we're dancing around things like atheist with a soul, or I'm spiritual but not religious,
Right.
and we struggle to find what it means to have reverence for the mystery of the entire of the universe and of life in general, but yet we want to use the word God because that's what feels powerful, at least for those of us that were raised with it. I look forward to talking more with people that. The times I've had conversations with people that don't use the word God, I find very interesting to me. Like they don't have reverence for the word,
Right.
The word was was instilled a great deal of reverence in me when I was young.
Well, that was definitely a thing that I remember just when I would write like a text message to somebody or an email. Probably more emails because this is probably predates text messaging. But
or letters.
I remember the shift.
I remember writing letters.
Yeah, I remember as a sort of like with my feathered quill. I remember at a certain point kind of having to make the decision of whether or not I was going to capitalize God when I wrote it, because now at this point it's like a word.
Right. Interesting.
And if I'm not suddenly worried about wrathful vengeance and I'm not suddenly worried about heaven or hell, then what is it? Why am I capitalizing this 3-letter word?
Right.
So I stopped.
Oh, interesting.
Because it was like, it's just another word. It doesn't make sense to capitalize. I don't know. Like,
was that? Did it feel like? Go ahead. What were you?
Well, I was gonna say, in a way, I think it was just like taking a stand in a way, and that sounds more. That sounds like I'm a revolutionary, but it's not what I'm saying. It's just more like this is helping cement my own beliefs on this matter.
These are the things we do in our private life that we live by, things that we live by that are reminders and cues to ourselves.
Exactly. And so, I just lowercased it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That. I still capitalize it. I think I hadn't thought about it. I'm not sure if I really have a lot of I have a lot of interest and respect for your thought in doing that. I'm not sure if that's something that bumps me in that way, but I like it. I mean, I certainly have done that stuff in my life too. That way of how do you do the regimen of life so that you are reinforcing for yourself the decisions that you want to live by.
Yeah.
What ways do you have ways that rituals in your life that you feel like have some sort of spiritual or divine component to them? And this, obviously this doesn't fit into any prior structure of what we would have called divine or spirituality. The terms are your own now, right? It could be obviously to some extent it's like a predator tattoo, which is an identity. It's something about adhering to a certain part of your love and identity, which is not your entire self, but there's something there.
It's close. I always tell myself I should be meditating more and being more, mindful. I mean, there was another big turning point for me was in my mid-20s, I guess. Your 20s are just an emotional
oh my God, yeah.
Fucking vortex.
I'm so glad I closed out 20s in therapy.
Yeah.
I was so fucking brutal.
Yeah,
it was brutal.
We're all super selfish.
I'm so insecure about so many things. With that insecure running rampant.
It's funny. It's like, when you're in your 20s, you're like, I'm an adult. Yeah. And then you start approaching your 40s, you're like, what the hell?
Yeah.
But a friend of ours, Nicholas Massou, who you should have on.
Oh my God, I can't wait to bring Nick on. Yeah.
So anyway, he gave me Eckhart Tolle. He gave me Power Now, like the audio book of it. And I just started listening to it. And thankfully, I just started listening to it before a bunch of horrible personal things started to go down. So it kind of helped me like work with all that stuff. And that was like another sort of like, because he's great when he talks about things like God, and he talks about things like he spent a lot of time in that first book talking about Jesus, but just in terms of like, here's what I think Jesus was actually talking about, not literally being like, I am the son of God, but rather like we all are the son of, like sort of he exploded it all a little bit and made it all like relatable and sort of, there was like a lot of like light bulb moments for me in that book and his future works after that, especially his soothing German voice. It's just
I actually don't know Eckhart Tolle all that well, surprisingly, and it reminds me as I talk to you that actually I've written it down that I have to read the book, because I feel like I've gotten this information from other works, but that he's a very important one, especially to people
I'm
that
sure
I
he's
care
saying,
about.
yeah, I'm sure a lot of them are orbiting the same concepts.
Or that he's influenced others that I've read, or whatever that is.
So through that, I had definitely gotten into a phase of trying to like meditate more often, try to just sort of be aware of the present moment, which is a very Buddhist thing. Those are the ways that I want to be more spiritual and have a routine, and I'm terrible about it.
What do you? Why? I mean, you're being funny, but why? Why do you think you're terrible at it?
Because I'm not doing it. Because it's so easy to fall out of the moment, and it's so easy to get in your head and start thinking about like everything else in your life.
Yeah.
And you just on a surface level of busyness, you don't have time to sit down and close your eyes and sit quietly for even like 5 minutes. Where I'm sure that I do.
Right.
Like the amount of times I'm looking at this phone. If I just didn't do that in a day, I'd have like an hour of just peaceful meditation.
And then screw off football season, right? I mean, come on, fantasy football season.
Well, we'll
is
talk
brutal.
about the fall. There will be no meditating.
No, it's terrible. No, but I guess my question is, and this is because this is something that I'm curious about too, is I wonder, and I'm not saying that this is entirely the case, but I'm going to pose this to you, is people say we should be meditating more. There's nothing wrong. Obviously, the idea is beautiful, and if it fits in your life in a way that feels really important. But meditating can be a lot of different things, and what does it mean to meditate for you? And I guess my question is, first, when you talk about the meditation you're talking about, that Eckhart Tolle is talking about, do you feel like you're enhanced, or do you feel a sort of vibrant benefit when you actually do take the time to do it?
Yeah.
So you are very specifically talking about like, I wish I would give this to myself more. And then, but you don't do it enough.
Yeah. So, yeah, exactly. Because you feel like a physical benefit to it. You feel a mental benefit to it. It's great. And then the only other thing I would say to that, answer that, your question there about spiritual practices or stuff like that, would be like, and this is definitely because I'm an only child, but like spending time with my friends is like for me, it's the most rejuvenating thing. So, because like right now, so I live in New Orleans for the show. I'm out here for a week to take a couple meetings, but honestly to like see everybody that I don't get to see 10 months out of the year, if not more. Right. And so like I already feel the way that I feel now versus how I felt when I landed on Saturday afternoon is like I feel like a completely new, happier person. I shouldn't necessarily want to like hang my hat on that and be like, this is the only way I could be happy.
No, that's a really beautiful and like thought-provoking point. So let's talk about that right after the break. So right before the break, Rob was talking about how meaningful it is, how much weight he puts on, or how much sort of love and relief he gets from being with his friends, spending time with friends. Mm-hmm. Not to say that he doesn't love his wife and child.
No, they're cool.
but he alluded to the fact that, they're like brothers and sisters to him. He's an only child. And I just had a little question about that, and I'd like you to spit it into... talking a little bit about what that means. You were saying that you said specifically the difference of the way I feel right now compared to a few days ago when I got here, having not seen my friends for months.
Yeah.
and having sort of been locked in the rhythm of work and family and raising a child, which I know is can be very trying and monotonous at times, despite all the love you're having and joy you're experiencing. It can be very, very difficult. And so now you get this moment of relief. You get to play with your friends. You get to hang out. You get to get thoughtful. And what does it mean that? And do you feel like you've always been that way, having never had siblings? Do you feel like you were like that as a child?
For sure. I mean, I was always comfortable in being an only child, I should say. And I don't mean that in the stereotypical, like, of course you were, because you had all the toys. Because I think that's a bunch of bullshit. But I was fine with it. I think I asked my parents once when I was 10, I was like, hey, you guys want to have another kid or something? And they like laughed in my face. And that was the end of that. And because the thing was that I had enough friends and was able to ride my bike to wherever and meet up with them and hang out with them. And so that just carried through as I got older and went through high school and did theater with all these jokers, and then got to USC and legitimately, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Poignant.
Yep. When people listen to this in a year, they won't know what I'm saying.
No, they'll know.
The news cycle have destroyed it.
They've been that's right. No, USC.
Well, there'll be some other scandal at USC
for so long. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. That's going to go on a long time.
So anyway, it all just carried through, and I don't know if it has to go back, if it goes back to the thing about being in the moment or whatever, but I don't know, when I'm with my friends and we're just making each other laugh and stuff like that, it's not that it's making me ignore everything else that's going on, but it just feels like you're locked into that present moment and like enjoying it, especially when I'm very blessed to have the friends that I have. Everyone's like hilarious and everyone's really creative, and so time spent with all of them is like rejuvenating, because you yourself are being forced to be hilarious and creative and all these things that are things that I value and hope want to be. And so it's just a great time, man.
Yeah, man. Well, it's an interesting thing too. Like, it is a feedback loop. Especially if you have the right group of friends. And people experience this. We all grow through this, and hopefully everyone grows through it in a positive way. Not everyone does, obviously. People fall into the wrong groups, but certainly with the group of friends that I know that we share together, and the group of friends that I know I have separate that I grew up with. It's an amazing moment, because it's also a moment of choice, right? It's an expression of who you are and what you love. The friends that you choose are part of your identity in a direct way, because they are reflections of your identity.
Right, and to get super hippie about it, it's like you said, it's like it's the love. God,
it's all good. You're on God and Other Delicacies, bro.
Man, sometimes I hate myself. But yeah, it is, honestly, it's like that's probably, if you were to like boil it down to its most pure emotional thing, it would be love. Like, and that is the closest thing that I can feel to God then. Is that emotion that I have towards the people in my life that I love, right? I mean, obviously I have it with my family too, but yeah, I don't know. There's just like a different energy, and it's well worth it.
So, again, beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I had a question about the different dynamic between, because now, so you don't have any brothers or sisters.
No.
So you have an even deeper relationship to your parents. Because they aren't siblings. I don't have any experience with this. This is where you and I are entirely different, because I'm in the middle of 5 kids.
Right.
There was almost no direct FaceTime with my parents.
Right,
I have a few select beautiful moments. My parents were very present, but a few select beautiful moments where I got to have private time. Like, my dad coming on a camping trip that was just with me and my group, my Boy Scouts or whatever, Indian guide is what we used to call it, which is probably not
problematic.
Probably not politically correct to say anymore. Wow. And then
you were in the Midwest. You guys get another couple years.
Well, I was. We grew exactly. So true, right? It takes a long time to get to the center. It
starts on the coast and then it just slowly closes in on you.
The internet has made that a little bit more rapid. Yeah. It wasn't just used to just be the news cycle, but no, totally. But yeah, man. So you had, clearly it sounds, or at least I shouldn't say clearly, it sounds to me that you had a type of relationship with your father that seemed to maybe be a bit more on a friend level, like a certain type of, at least a freedom to express thoughts in a way that didn't feel like you were threatening him or you felt threatened. But it sounds like maybe your mother was a bit more oversensitive to some of these. And again, this is sort of like maybe bordering on therapy and less God. But
No, it's the same thing.
But it's kind of like the thought being, how did those different relationships sort of influence you in a way, or cross over into this idea of like what family structure is?
Right,
and,
right.
How does it identifying relatiationships? I have no insight into that.
Yeah, right. No, I mean, I would say it's a little bit different than what you sort of ascertained. I had an incredibly close relationship with them because, again, the only child thing. There were some key years where my dad lived in Connecticut while we lived in Massachusetts because his job was like a 3-hour commute.
Wow. So he only came home on weekends.
So he had an apartment.
That's tough. That's like he
had an apartment in Connecticut. Yeah, exactly. So I spent a lot of time with my mom, and so we got super close. I was super close with my dad too, but I think if you're talking about like who's more like the friend and who's more the parent, it would be like my mom was more the one who I'd be like, I don't know, I like this girl, but she doesn't like me.
Oh wow, how fascinating!
But of course, my mom being my mother and all the sort of stereotypes there, I was like, she does like you. She's just acting like she doesn't like you because that's how girls are, or something like that.
That's great.
So yeah, it's great. It was fairly destructive, but she was coming from a good place, so I don't hold it against her. But definitely but my dad was always more of the sort of the practical, in a lot of ways, not every way, but the practical kind of like he was more. He wasn't stern, but he was just more like the whatever, about everything. And so like less emotion than my mom. So when this religion stuff came up, and he came up from the more practical side of like, well, just get confirmed and then honestly do whatever you want. And my mother didn't want to hear about it. And then there was definitely a Thanksgiving that happened in my early-ish 20s when I had really just like solidified everything. Where I was like, guys, I'm not Catholic. I don't know. Like somehow it came up and I was like, that's just not what I am. And I know my mother heard it because she was looking right at me. But to this day, like 4 days ago when I came out here, before I saw her, like I dropped my car off with them because they live in New Orleans now, and my dad took me to the airport. My mom's like, just make sure to say your 3 Hail Marys, and I'll say mine. And it's just like, okay, like I don't even say anything anymore.
Wow.
Because it gets back to like you're talking about literally uttering spells.
Yeah.
You're talking about protective spells of magic that will keep my plane from crashing.
Right.
Which I just don't think is high on God's priority list.
No, it seems hard to believe that, and yet it's such a fascinating aspect of just humans, right? Like this desire to have control over the unknown,
right? Just more. And my, if we're talking about my specific relationship with my parents, I think my mom's big on traditions, and obviously religion's like the biggest tradition. It spans hundreds, if not thousands of years, depending on the one you're talking about. And for her, it was the idea of change, especially in that way, is not, she can't,
Did you baptize your son?
No.
So did she have any comments about that, or?
No, I'm sure she did to somebody.
Yeah.
Not to me.
Yeah. And your dad has remained the pragmatist, like,
pretty much.
This doesn't ruffle his feathers.
Yeah. It'll be curious, not to go dark with this, but it'll be curious as they get older and as, they start to get to the finish line there, how they want to go about, like how if things change, or how if they end up coming back to the church more than they are now. Like, because as far as I know right now, they're not going, they don't go to mass really much at all. But I don't want to speak for them because we never talk about it, because anytime we talk about it, my mom ignores anything I say.
Right. Do you find... So you kind of mentioned earlier, like, and I certainly have this experience with my wife, which is that she has been an amazing... I think if you choose the right partner in your life, you have just an amazing stabilizing force. For me, there's no doubt about it. Like, my being with her has allowed me to have, like, to really truly express freely, like, the kind of thing that I really am.
Yeah, totally.
And I imagine it's been that way with you and your wife. And I wondered, what is her background with religion? And she seemed so in the story you told earlier about her being like, no, I'm pretty sure we all just died and it's all good.
Yeah.
Like, she seemed like maybe she didn't have any, she didn't come up with any sort of like overbearing guilt of religion. So maybe she comes out of it, or maybe that was all just like independent work.
It was basically her family, her grandfather was a missionary.
Wow.
Yeah. But
where?
In Thailand.
Wow.
And I think primarily in Thailand, but I think maybe also in India, because they spent time there. So all
was
of her.
he a native of that area, or was he a native of the United States?
He was
and he would be a
from
missionary
the Midwest,
there.
and he went out
Wow.
and he went out there.
Wow, fantastic.
And super nice guy, still alive. He's like 90, early 90s, I think. Her grandfather.
Wow.
And
That's
they
cool.
had like 5 kids, but also adopted another one. And most of my wife's aunts and uncles, I think, retained some semblance of religion. I can't remember which one it is. Episcopalian, maybe. I can't remember the exact. It's a Protestant, in the Protestant branch of things.
Yeah.
But my mother-in-law bailed and went Buddhist, like full on went Zen Buddhist, like I am a Zen Buddhist.
Okay.
But Angeli was going to church, like that was a little later. Like Angeli was going to church.
So I'm sorry,
first...
just to follow.
Yeah.
Her grandfather had a daughter who is your mother-in-law.
Yes.
And
she as far as I know, she's the only one of the aunts and uncles and whatever the sisters
that generation.
The brothers and sisters that veered off.
Okay, so they've remained pretty, like, obviously he's a missionary. Many of them took on his devotion to some level.
Yes,
and she was the only one that actually broke off from
it. But my mother-in-law went to like some sort of seminary school. Like she was in it for a while, and then I think when my wife was like 10 or 12, something like that, she finally she bailed. That's the story of my wife's family.
Yeah, well, I guess the last, just kind of, since we're tying it up here, I mean, your wife then took like some sort of, she must have taken a page from your mother's sort of rebellious spirit to some extent. Or your mother-in-law's rebellious spirit?
I think so. I think she just also kind of came to the same, she obviously didn't have as intense an upbringing in it as I did, just in terms of the difference between the way that, or maybe they were Lutheran, whatever.
Yeah,
the way. So, I honestly, I don't know exactly when and how she sort of, but I think high school, we all got into punk music and we all just started thinking about other things and, expanding our mind. That's why I love her so much, is that she's able to sort of like think from a bunch of different perspectives, and she landed on that one.
Buddy, it is such a joy talking to you. Like,
thanks,
this,
man.
It's so nice to kick this off with a friend that I feel so familiar with, and we can have these conversations just outside of a radio show. But it's really beautiful for you to come on and share, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun. I think it was good. It's good to like that you had somebody that was also Catholic. I feel like the fact that we had this similar sort of like semi-adjacent childhood, so that we could then have a reference point to branch off to. I'm excited to see where you go with other people who didn't have this, like, the slightly shared early years. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be
I
good.
have no idea.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be awesome.
But it's all gonna be good in its different way, you know. But it's just wonderful to have you here.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
And lots of love, and thank you to you all for listening.
Yeah,
we'll see you next time.